Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome her as she comes to the stage to deliver a few thoughts on the role of domestic capital in the technology sector, Ms. Odun Eweniyi. A round of applause for her as she steps forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Odun Eweniyi. I'm co-founder and CEO of Piggyvest and also co-founder and GP at First Check. I'm particularly honored to be delivering this address on the role of domestic capital in Nigeria's tech ecosystem. I have worked in this ecosystem for now about 9 years, but started Piggyvest as a company 7 years ago, which is incidentally when Nigeria's tech ecosystem kind of got a new life breathed into it. Now, to talk about the role of domestic capital in our ecosystem, we first have to examine what is the Nigerian tech ecosystem and what are our success stories. In 2020, Paystack was acquired. We all know Paystack. Paystack was acquired by an Irish company called Stripe for about $200 million. And in 2021, Flutterwave became Nigeria's first real unicorn. I know we talk about Jumia, but we claim Flutterwave. And one of the things that we can see from there is that Nigeria's tech ecosystem really kicked off in 2016 with companies like Paystack, with companies like Flutterwave, with companies like Piggyvest, and a few other small companies that have now become gigantic, employing more than 50,000 people across just our small ecosystem. Now, Flutterwave currently serves over 300,000 businesses globally, and Paystack serves 80,000 businesses. Piggyvest itself serves a cumulative 6.5 million people across Nigeria today. And we have the rise of tech companies like Vendees, Kobo360, Carrywise, RiseVest, all of whom have all received external capital. Right, the value of the Nigerian tech ecosystem, actually just Lagos, is estimated to be about $9 billion, with our 2022 fundraise so far being placed at about $750 million. Over the past 7 years, we, as an ecosystem, just about 400 startups, have cumulatively raised almost $2 billion, right? And that's just 7 years of operations. Now, the role of domestic capital, right? One of the things that's really important for us to think about is that all of the capital that I just mentioned is almost exclusively from funders from outside of the country. When Paystack was acquired, there were a few angel investors that have benefited and a few funds, but ultimately, the beneficiaries are always either from the UK, the US, or just Europe. We have an ultimate beneficiary problem. When we raise, where do we raise from? Pre-seed rounds, seed rounds, Series A rounds, we almost never hear about local funders. Almost exclusively, you're hearing Y Combinator, Techstars, and literally every single accelerator program. Even Google has a Black Founders Fund. That's not ours. And that means that our pipeline, our leads, our talent are all headed elsewhere. Tubosu was just telling you that 3 out of 5 developers have left the country. As a matter of fact, one of the biggest problems that we face in Nigeria's tech ecosystem today is just the outpouring of people to Canada, to Finland. People are going to Switzerland. They are braving other climates just to move away from here, and we're deeply, deeply losing. But the truth is, there is so much value being catalyzed by our ecosystem today, and it just feels like that's only being recognized by people from outside of Nigeria. How do we fix it? Look, there is no one better aligned to understand the problems that Nigerian startups are solving other than local funders. There's no one that uniquely understands that we pay rent in bulk, in cash, and upfront. There's no one better aligned to understand restaurant problems in Nigeria than Nigerian funders. There's no one that understands the pain of businesses receiving payments in Nigeria other than Nigerian funders. Why is the local ecosystem not funding its own startups? Why is it that when we want to raise funding, we all pack bags and backpack through the US? We backpack through Europe, through the UK, talking to people who have no understanding and no perspective of the problem that we're facing. This year, we started fundraising at our company, and I cannot explain to you just how many people I had to explain to that we don't pay first and last month's rent in Nigeria. We pay everything. That we don't have installment payments for our cars. We pay everything. That our education is done upfront. Flutterwave is constantly raising and having to explain to people, oh, we have points of failures in our payment system. But everyone seated in this room understands it. Every local Nigerian billionaire, millionaire, thousandaire understands that. And we need more of that capital coming into our ecosystem. So, value alignment, right? Why should you fund like Nigeria startups? Like I mentioned, we've catalyzed over $10 billion in just value, right? Flutterwave, Jumia, all of these startups, VendEase, Kobo 360, we are constantly hearing about Nigerian startups in the news, but every time we are associating them with, Greycroft, Base Capital, companies outside of our ecosystem, companies with no understanding of our values or our value system, but capturing the value being created by Nigerian co-founders and founders. There are women here building. There are kids here building. Emmanuel Njoku is a 19-year-old who started a company called LaserPay and has gone on to serve over 100 businesses. Every time he has to talk about funding, he's talking to white people. He's talking to Chinese people. He's talking to Asians. Nigerians and Africans make up less than 5% of the people that we speak to when we're raising capital. But if we want economic growth, we have to redirect capital towards our own companies. I'm very proud to be standing here at the Prize for Innovation today because ideally, every time you go for a competition, Seedstars, Techstars, we're talking to people who eventually will carry that value and move it outside of our economy. We are developing other countries while we are building and just like focusing on solving Nigerian problems. If we want that kind of economic growth, we need to direct value to where value is being created. Nigerian startups, we will not lie to you, we need the resources. We have to raise funding to create value. Every startup I know right now is actively trying to raise capital in the middle of the economic downturn, right? The first thing that people do when the economy is going into a recession is that they pull funding from Africa. Everyone's strategy now is we are investing only in follow-ons or only in the US or North America. Everybody's first move is to pull funding from Africa. If everyone is pulling funding from Africa, what does Africa do? How does Africa grow? Where are like the new crop of innovators going to get their first round of funding? How are we raising pre-seed and seed rounds that can be filled up with Nigerian investors? Now, I've talked about solving pain and not solving surface problems, but a value particularly that's created when you fund local innovators is that we actively de-risk the ecosystem. Every time a round, a pre-seed round or a seed round or a launch round is filled with Nigerian funders, we are attracting capital to our ecosystem and actively catalyzing foreign direct investment in our own way. We talk a lot about foreign investment into Nigeria, but the first point of de-risking a startup is someone who gives it its first round of funding. That's what Ventures Platform is doing. That's what Voltron is doing, making sure that we give those startups their first round of funding, their first round of belief capital, so that when we are looking at the likes of Greycroft, Base Capital, and TLCom, and all of these people, they're able to say that there is enough local interest in this startup that we feel comfortable following it on. Look, our ecosystem is still very nascent. We're about 7 years old in the new age, new revolution. And what that means is that in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to start to see mergers and acquisition activities. When we're seeing mergers and acquisition activities, it makes better sense for Nigerian startups to consolidate in Nigeria. It makes better sense for African startups to consolidate in Africa. If we don't, what happens is that companies much like Stripe come and start to pick up our own companies that are solving local problems. Eventually, Americans, the Chinese, the Asians become the ultimate beneficiaries of problems that are originating here. We have real challenges and real pain that represents real opportunity if the problem is solved right here. And it's easy to speak about the problems, but we've made a lot of progress with companies like Ventures Platform, Voltron, TLCom, and a bunch of other African and Nigerian funds. We've already started to make progress. And now we have the NSIA's Prize for Innovation, and hopefully more people are catalyzed to do more. Angel investors, Nigerian wealthy people, I think that there is a lot of value to be captured from our ecosystem, and there's always space to do more. Thank you.